Daniel Foster had no intention of speaking to the woman in the corner. She was obviously important. Her tailored navy blue suit probably cost more than his monthly rent. Two assistants stood nearby, quietly checking schedules on their tablets. Several executives waited patiently for her attention. Meanwhile, Daniel was simply trying to finish another shift. My name is Daniel Foster. I was 37 years old, a single father, a high school basketball coach during the day, an event bartender on weekends. Life had taught me that pride doesn't pay bills. After my wife, Hannah, passed away from a sudden illness 4 years earlier, I accepted every honest job I could find. Teaching covered the mortgage. Weekend catering jobs paid for my daughter Emma's piano lessons, school trips, and the small college savings account I added to every month. Emma was 8 years old. She had inherited her mother's kindness and curiosity. Every morning before school, she placed a tiny handwritten note inside my lunch bag. Sometimes it simply read, "Good luck today, Dad." Other times, "Don't forget to smile." Those little notes stayed folded inside my wallet long after the paper became worn. Whenever life felt overwhelming, I opened one and remembered exactly why I kept working. That Saturday evening, I was tending the bar at the annual Brooks Foundation Charity Gala. The Grand Crescent Hotel ballroom looked breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors. Fresh white roses decorated every table. A live orchestra quietly played classical music while hundreds of wealthy guests arrived wearing elegant evening gowns and tailored tuxedos. The event raised millions each year for children's hospitals. Daniel enjoyed working charity events. Unlike corporate parties, people generally behaved better. Or so he thought. Before the guests entered, the catering manager gathered the staff. One reminder. Tonight's host is CEO Victoria Brooks. Treat every guest professionally. And whatever happens, do not approach Ms. Brooks unless she approaches you. Everyone nodded. Daniel simply smiled. I'll be too busy making drinks. The manager laughed. Good. As the ballroom filled, Daniel quietly served sparkling water, soft drinks, and cocktails. He noticed Victoria Brooks only in passing. She greeted hospital directors warmly, spent extra time talking with children invited from local pediatric centers, knelt to speak at eye level with every child she met. That surprised him. Most billionaires he had served rarely noticed anyone outside their business circles. Victoria seemed different. She carried herself with confidence, but never arrogance. Hours passed smoothly. Around 9 o'clock, the crowd shifted toward the dance floor. The orchestra transitioned into slower music. Couples began dancing beneath the chandeliers. Daniel polished another glass while watching from behind the bar. A fellow bartender nudged him. Think the CEO will dance? Daniel chuckled. Probably. Who's the lucky man tonight? He said it casually, without realizing someone had quietly stepped up beside the bar. A calm female voice answered. I was hoping that would be you. Daniel nearly dropped the glass. He turned. Victoria Brooks stood only a few feet away. She smiled with amused eyes. You look disappointed. Daniel laughed nervously. I wasn't expecting anyone to answer. I know. I couldn't resist. Several nearby guests glanced toward them. Daniel suddenly became very aware that he was still wearing a bartender's apron. I'm working. So am I. She looked around the crowded ballroom. Hosting charity galas counts as work. He smiled. I suppose it does. Victoria leaned against the bar. You've been here all evening. You haven't looked impressed by anyone. Daniel shrugged. I'm mostly focused on not spilling drinks. She laughed. That's refreshingly honest. One of her assistants hurried over. Ms. Brooks. The mayor would like a word. I'll be there in a minute. The assistant nodded and stepped away. Victoria looked back at Daniel. I never caught your name. Daniel Foster. I'm Victoria. I know. She smiled. I was hoping you might. Before leaving, she surprised him again. Don't disappear before the evening ends. I'd like to talk. Daniel watched her walk away. The bartender beside him stared in disbelief. What was that about? Daniel shook his head. I honestly have no idea. For the next hour, he tried convincing himself she was simply being polite. But every few minutes, he noticed Victoria glancing toward the bar. Not obviously, just enough to make him wonder. When the charity auction ended, Daniel finally took his scheduled 10-minute break. He stepped outside onto the hotel terrace for fresh air. The city skyline glittered beneath the night sky. He pulled Emma's latest note from his wallet. It read, Remember, Dad. Kind people find kind people. He smiled quietly. A moment later, The terrace door opened. Victoria stepped outside alone. No assistants. No executives. No photographers. She joined him at the railing. For someone surrounded by hundreds of people, she looked out over the city lights. This is the only quiet place in the building. Daniel nodded. I noticed. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. Finally, Victoria smiled. You never answered my question. Daniel looked confused. What question? She laughed softly. When you asked who the lucky man would be tonight. She turned to face him. I meant what I said. I was hoping it would be you. Daniel stared at her in complete surprise, completely unaware that this unexpected conversation would become the beginning of a story neither of them could have imagined. Daniel stood speechless. For several long seconds, he wondered if he had misunderstood her. Surely one of the country's most successful CEOs wasn't seriously flirting with a weekend bartender. Victoria noticed the confusion on his face and smiled. You look like you're trying to solve a math problem. Daniel laughed nervously. I'm just wondering why someone like you would say something like that to someone like me. She folded her arms against the cool evening breeze. And what exactly is someone like me? He shrugged. A billionaire. A CEO. A woman whose picture is on the cover of business magazines. She tilted her head. And someone like you? A high school basketball coach who pours drinks on weekends. Victoria smiled gently. See, that's the problem. What problem? You described my job. And your paycheck. You didn't describe either of us. Daniel looked away for a moment. She was right. Somewhere along the way, he had unconsciously decided that successful people belonged in a completely different world. Victoria broke the silence. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you working 2 jobs? Most people assume the answer before asking. Debt. Poor decisions. Failure. Daniel answered honestly. My daughter. Victoria smiled. Tell me about her. His entire face changed. He pulled his wallet from his pocket and carefully removed a small photograph. 8-year-old Emma sat behind a piano, smiling proudly after her first recital. She's the reason I wake up every morning. My wife passed away 4 years ago. I promised Emma that no matter how difficult life became, she would never feel like she had less because her mother was gone. Victoria studied the photograph quietly. She's beautiful. She looks like her mom. Daniel nodded. Thankfully. For a few moments neither of them spoke. Finally Victoria admitted something she had never shared publicly. My father died when I was 16. Daniel looked surprised. I didn't know. Most people don't. My mother built the company. When she retired, everyone assumed I inherited an easy life. She laughed softly. They never saw the 18-hour workdays. The lonely hotel rooms. The birthdays I spent answering business calls. Daniel noticed something beneath her confident voice. Loneliness. The kind that success couldn't erase. Before either of them could continue, Victoria's assistant stepped onto the terrace. Ms. Brooks. The board members are looking for you. She nodded. I'll be right there. Turning back to Daniel, she smiled. Will you still be here when the event ends? My shift finishes at 11. I'll wait. True to her word, Victoria remained after the last guest left. Instead of climbing into her waiting limousine, she walked toward the staff entrance where Daniel was collecting his backpack. Several employees stopped to watch. One whispered, "Is she waiting for him?" Victoria ignored the curious looks. "Have you eaten?" Daniel laughed. "Not since lunch." "Good. I know a diner that's still open." He looked surprised. "A diner?" She grinned. "I spend enough time in fancy restaurants. Tonight, I want pancakes." 20 minutes later they sat in a quiet neighborhood diner. No photographers. No executives. No luxury. Just 2 people sharing breakfast food after midnight. They talked for hours. Daniel told stories about coaching teenagers who believed they weren't good enough until someone believed in them. Victoria spoke about building a company where employees felt respected instead of intimidated. Neither tried to impress the other. There was no need. As the waitress refilled their coffee, she smiled. "You two make a cute couple." Daniel almost choked on his coffee. Victoria simply smiled. "Thank you." Outside the diner, Daniel checked the time. "I should get home. My daughter has church choir practice in the morning." Victoria nodded. "I understand." Before they parted, she handed him a simple business card. "No pressure. If you'd ever like coffee again, call me." He smiled. "I'd like that." Over the following months, coffee became walks in the park. Walks became dinners. Dinners became weekends spent helping Emma build science projects or attending her basketball games. Victoria never tried to replace Emma's mother. She simply became another adult who genuinely cared. Emma adored her. One evening, after Victoria helped bake cookies for a school fundraiser, Emma quietly whispered to Daniel, "Dad, yes. She smiles differently when she's with us." Daniel noticed the same thing. The serious CEO who commanded boardrooms laughed freely while playing board games at their kitchen table. Months later, gossip magazines finally discovered the relationship. Headlines questioned why one of the country's wealthiest women was dating a widowed school coach. Television commentators speculated it was publicity. Others insisted it couldn't last. Victoria ignored every headline. At a shareholder meeting, one investor boldly asked, "Don't you think this relationship hurts your image?" Victoria smiled calmly. "No, it improves my life." A year later, Daniel stood on a small stage during another Brooks Foundation charity gala. This time, he wasn't serving drinks. He was being honored for creating a free youth basketball program for children who couldn't afford organized sports. Victoria presented the award herself. She looked at the audience before smiling at Daniel. The greatest leaders aren't always found in boardrooms. Sometimes they're found teaching children, serving strangers, and quietly keeping promises to their families. The audience rose in applause. Daniel looked toward Emma sitting proudly in the front row, then back at Victoria. He remembered the joke he had made behind the bar months earlier. "Who's the lucky man tonight?" At the time, he thought it was nothing more than a passing comment. Now he understood the answer. Neither of them had been the lucky one alone. They both were. Because genuine love isn't built on wealth, status, or impressive titles. It's built when two people recognize the goodness in each other long before they ever notice everything else. And sometimes the most life-changing conversation begins with a joke spoken by a tired single father and an unexpected answer from a CEO brave enough to follow her heart.